Brazil, Chile, Libya, Iran, to Indonesia, and many others. Different continents, different histories, but they all have one thing in common. Their leaders didn't fall by accident. Behind the scenes, a hidden hand was moving the pieces. Covert missions, assassinations, psychological warfare. This was the work of the CIA. Not in the shadows of fiction, but in real-world politics. Changing regimes, crushing movements, and redrawing the global map, all in the name of freedom. What if I told you that one of the groups America is fighting today, the Houthis, actually rose to power because of America? Yep. The very force being bombed and labeled a threat right now was born out of a power vacuum the US helped create during the Arab Spring. When Yemen's leader, a longtime US ally, was pushed out with Western support, the chaos opened the door for the Houthis to rise. The same pattern happened with the Taliban in Afghanistan, ISIS in Iraq and Syria, Al-Qaeda in the aftermath of the Soviet War, and even radical militias in Libya after Gaddafi's fall. In chasing short-term goals, America ended up creating long-term enemies. So the question isn't how many governments did the CIA bring down, it's how many of today's global crises were set in motion because of it. This video is about how the CIA secretly rewrote global history, and how those actions are still blowing up, literally, in America's face today. After World War II, the world wasn't just divided, it was boiling. The US had just won a war, dropped 2 atomic bombs, and was suddenly facing a new threat, the Soviet Union. And unlike Nazi Germany, this wasn't a fight with tanks. It was a fight of influence, ideology, and secrets. That's why, in 1947, President Truman signed the National Security Act, creating the Central Intelligence Agency. Its original mission? Just one thing: gather intelligence, spy on enemies, understand foreign threats, keep America safe. But here's the catch: information alone didn't stop communism. And Washington quickly realized that. So the CIA's job evolved. No longer just watchers, they became players in the game. They weren't just listening behind closed doors. They were opening them, flipping regimes, and funding revolutions. Because in the Cold War mindset, every country was a chess piece. And if the Soviets were about to take one, America would rather burn the whole board than lose. This shift, from information gathering to covert operations, wasn't written into law, but it became standard operating procedure. Backroom deals, secret funding, propaganda, political assassinations, all under the umbrella of national security. And that's how a spy agency became a secret government, capable of reshaping entire nations without anyone voting for it. In the early 1950s, Iran wasn't run by extremists or generals. It was run by a man named Mohammad Mossadegh. He was a democratically elected prime minister, and he did something revolutionary. He nationalized Iran's oil. For the first time, Iran's oil money would go to Iran, not British or American companies. But that didn't sit well with the West. So in 1953, the CIA and British MI6 launched Operation Ajax, a covert coup that overthrew Mossadegh. The plan involved bribes, fake protests, and media manipulation, all carefully orchestrated by CIA operatives. They replaced Iran's democracy with a Western-backed monarchy, the Shah of Iran. The Shah ruled with an iron fist, heavily supported by US military and intelligence. For 26 years, Iranians lived under secret police, censorship, and a regime more loyal to Washington than to its people. Eventually, the pressure exploded. In 1979, the Iranian Revolution swept the Shah out of power. But this time, democracy didn't return. Instead, a radical new force took over: Ayatollah Khomeini and the rise of the Islamic Republic of Iran, an anti-American theocracy fueled by decades of foreign interference. But the revolution didn't bring peace. It brought war. Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein and quietly backed by the US, saw the chaos in Iran as a perfect moment to invade. He feared Iran's revolution would spread to Shiite Muslims inside Iraq. So in 1980, he launched a brutal invasion, starting the Iran-Iraq War. one of the bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century. Ironically, the US, which had helped install a Shah, now funded his enemy in a war against the very regime its own actions had created. The revolution taught Iran one thing: don't rely on anyone, especially not the US. So, over the years, Iran started building nuclear technology, claiming it was for peaceful energy. But the US, haunted by the rise of another hostile regime it indirectly empowered, believed it was for bombs. This sparked decades of tensions: sanctions, covert sabotage, assassinations of Iranian scientists, and proxy wars in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. And now in 2025, the US still fears Iran's nuclear potential. Not because of what happened recently, but because of what CIA started in 1953. In the end of the video, you can check every detail in the CIA's own Summary of Operation Ajax in the National Security Archive. You'll find these sources to all what I mentioned, and also for the next operations. Just 1 year after Iran, the CIA turned its eyes on Central America. In 1954, Guatemala was run by Jacobo Arbenz, a democratically elected president who dared to challenge the status quo. His crime? He tried to redistribute unused farmland, much of which belonged to the United Fruit Company, an American corporation with powerful friends in Washington. The CIA labeled him a communist threat and launched Operation PB Success. They armed mercenaries, spread fake radio broadcasts, and even dropped bombs from US-supplied planes. Arbenz was overthrown. And just like that, another democracy was crushed, not by its people, but by a foreign agency working to protect corporate interests. The coup plunged Guatemala into decades of horror. From 1960 to 1996, the country was locked in a brutal civil war between the US-backed military regimes and leftist insurgents. The result? Over 200,000 people killed. More than 40,000 disappeared. 83% of the victims were Maya indigenous people, targeted in what UN investigators later called a genocide. The truth came out in the United Nations Truth Commission report. Over 90% of human rights violations were committed by government forces, trained and armed with American support. Ask most Americans what happened in Guatemala in the 50s, and they don't know. But for Guatemalans, the memory lives on. A democratic dream destroyed by fear, fruit, and foreign power. And to this day, Guatemala struggles with the consequences: corruption, inequality, and a broken political system that was never allowed to grow on its own terms. While soldiers and drones may dominate the battlefield, the most dangerous weapon is narrative. For decades, the CIA and US government have mastered psychological warfare, not just through bombs, but through media, culture, and repetition. From Operation Mockingbird, where journalists were allegedly paid to spread CIA-approved stories, to modern tactic using social media algorithms, the real war is for your mind. Here's how it works. Ever heard a song you hated at first, but after hearing it 10 times on the radio, you started liking it? That's called the mere exposure effect. The more we're exposed to something, the more we accept it. This same trick is used in news and Hollywood. Repeated headlines, emotionally charged images, and dramatic movie scenes gradually shape how we see the world, especially who's good and who's bad. Take war films. American soldiers in Iraq or Afghanistan are often shown as tormented heroes, victims of war, not the aggressors. Hollywood rarely shows the destruction, the civilian deaths, or the torture reports. Instead, it reframes invasions as emotional struggles for the US military. It's not just entertainment, it's psychological programming. These strategies aren't just about fighting enemies overseas. They're about controlling how you see the world. When the news keeps telling you a country is dangerous, when headlines repeat the same phrases, when public opinion swings overnight, it's not always coincidence, it's manipulation. Silent, invisible, and deeply effective. ISIS didn't begin as a global terrorist network. It originally grew out of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which was formed in response to the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. After Saddam Hussein's regime was toppled, the US dismantled the Iraqi army and purged Ba'ath Party members from government, effectively firing hundreds of thousands of trained, armed, and now jobless soldiers. Many of these men, furious and desperate, joined the resistance, first Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which later evolved into ISIS. When the US pulled out of Iraq in 2011, the power vacuum and ongoing Sunni-Shia tensions gave ISIS the chance to grow rapidly. The group positioned itself as a protector of Sunnis against the Shia-led Iraqi government, backed by Iran and the US. Soon, ISIS swept across Iraq and Syria, seizing territory the size of the UK, using brutal violence and propaganda to establish its so-called caliphate. Ironically, the US war that was supposed to bring peace to Iraq birthed one of the most terrifying groups in modern history. Al-Qaeda, led by Osama bin Laden, emerged directly from the US-backed Mujahideen networks fighting the Soviets. Bin Laden was not a direct CIA asset, but the environment the US created, funding militant Islamist groups, providing weapons and training, laid the foundation. After the war, Al-Qaeda shifted its focus toward the West, accusing the US of occupying Muslim lands, particularly in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War. The 9/11 attacks made Al-Qaeda infamous, and the US response, two massive wars, drone strikes, surveillance, only helped the group splinter and spread globally. It became a brand of extremism, inspiring groups from North Africa to Southeast Asia. What started as a fight against the Soviets evolved into the central figure of America's war on terror, a war partly of its own making. These groups didn't emerge out of nowhere. Each one was either created, empowered, or given space to grow because of US interventions, regime changes, or covert operations. In trying to reshape the world, America ended up creating some of its most dangerous enemies. Some enemies were born out of ideology, but many were born out of intervention, manipulation, and unintended consequences. Before asking you any questions, I need you to understand that the most dangerous power isn't military, it's information. The CIA doesn't hold the pen that signs the orders, but they do write the script the president reads from. If they choose what to show and what to hide, they can quietly steer entire nations. Decisions that seem presidential might just be well-packaged intelligence. If the forces shaping our world operate in the shadows, who's really in control? And how many of today's enemies were yesterday's allies? Unfortunately, my channel isn't monetized yet, so I can't put the link sources in the description, so you'll find them in the first comment instead. Go check them. And let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video for more content like this.